Everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. We're going to look at a little Homelite XL automatic. That's pretty faded, but that looks like a J date code 1988. Okay. So before it went to the plastic anti-vibe model, still kind of looked like an old Super Tube, you know? Okay. I've done videos before about you get a new saw, new to you, not new, but new to you. You know nothing about it. Where the hell do you start? Well, that's how this is going to be for me. This is one that at some point somebody contacted me and said, hey, I'm done with this. Send me a shipping label and you can have it. I'm trying to find a date code on here and I'm not finding it. But it's got my address and my return address, and that's how I do those shipping labels. I don't remember the story. I should. If there was a note in the box, it is long gone. Previous owner did send the original owner's manual. I mean, that's pretty cool. But nice bar. Needs the rails closed, but the paint's not all totally destroyed. The saw is torn apart somewhat. There's no air filter on it. The air filter housing cover was jammed into the muffler here. I'm assuming that was just from shipping or me unpackaging it initially and going, oh crap, I'm done with this. There's some extra parts in the box that don't fit this saw. There's a whole buttload of chains. This is a hand guard, there's an air filter. I actually think this person may have bought some parts from me. Yeah, we've got a new clutch, used sprocket, and an intake manifold that doesn't even fit this particular version of the saw. Spark plug that is one of the goofiest sons of bitch, Champion Econo Clean. You guys ever seen one like that? Looks like that would foul out in a heartbeat. That's such a small little area between the insulator and the rest of the plug. Oop. Maybe that's why it's in the box, not on the saw. I don't know. I know nothing about this saw. And anything that I did know, I forgot a long time ago. So, let's see if we can figure it out. We'll do this as live as we can. You know, I won't waste your time with stupid stuff like me talking right now, but let's dig into it. Okay, so I just put some fuel in it. We're going to try to start it. I just need to know what it's doing. First observation, bottom of the tank looked like that. That is mostly evaporated fuel with, I guess, the oil left behind and probably some sludge. Doesn't bode well for this thing starting. But you know what? We're going to try, because we need to know. But we're not going to try for that long. I'm going to reset the carb to something, that makes sense for me. What the hell? We'll see what happens. Not much. Whoa. That was weird. Whoa. Okay, we're done. Not gonna start. Smell fuel. Okay. The fuel hose that's on here is rotten, and when it tipped over, it leaked fuel out. How much you want to bet we got a broken starter pawl in here? So, let's start taking it apart. These saws are so simple in their design. It sucks that you've got to take the engine out of the case, that's a step. I guess it sucks. I'm used to it. I don't care. Well, I already know what the problem is. You suppose that screw belongs jammed in there? That one right there? I don't think so. That is one of the handle screws. So that rattled around in the box. and managed to get caught up in the flywheel magnet. Okay, the pawls aren't broken, but this washer that goes to the handguard also doesn't belong in there. What else do we have? Anybody else living in here? Alright, that was cute. Someone's built a custom ground. Interesting. I still want to hear what it does. We're not going to spend a lot of time cranking it over for no reason, but I want to know what we're working with. Take two. Okay, that is not going to start. I will say that compression does not feel robust. This thing's been out of the case before because the spark plug wire is up higher than it should be. Let's just see if this thing has spark. That's pretty good. That's about what I would expect from one of these HDA coils on these things. Alright. We need to go through stuff. And for grins, let's just take a peek at the piston. Muffler doesn't even have to come off to come out of the case. But found another part dropping out of the engine. This is kind of amazing. This engine makes its own parts and then pukes them out. Alright, piston's a little dark. Rings there, not scored. See some very light, what I think are scratches there, but not a lot. Not enough that it should be down on compression for that. So, I'm just not going to worry about that right now. Let's get the engine out of the case. See if I can quit spilling fuel all over the place. God, even the new duckbill appears to be leaking here, or what was a new duckbill. I don't know if there's crap in it plugging it up or what. Alright. And this is why I say these things are pretty simple, because they come apart really easily. Let's get our kill switch lead off. The switch will stay in the housing as we slide the engine out. Something about like that. Now when the muffler's still on, you want to tuck this right in here. And then she'll just slide right out. Push your adjuster screw in tight. And then, and I'm going to zoom in on this. This has caused a lot of breakage. You don't have to take this handle cover off. Now this one has a screw, so it's easier to do without breaking something. Just start sliding it out. And if it's installed right, which this one is not, I love it when she makes a liar of me. This one's installed incorrectly. So we have to take that handle cover off. I will show you the right way to install it so that you do not. These throttle rods, the loops are not the same on both ends, all right? this one, because we're already half disassembled, is going to be a pain in my butt. Alright, let that come out. Okay, now see, they're not the same. This is much wider. This one belongs on top. This one belongs on bottom. So what I'm going to do is attempt to put this back together. Because I don't want to have all this apart. I don't want to have it sitting here ready to explode on me. I don't want to risk breaking it. I want to leave it all together. So now I'm going to hook it back up. And then we're going to do it the right, well, what I consider to be the right way, and the way that is detailed in the service manuals. The only trick on these is not having a front trigger. Alright. Well, thanks. Way to make it so the little demonstration of easy isn't so easy. Ay, ay, ay. I tell you, folks, making videos isn't as easy as you might think. Or as I want, maybe? Maybe's a better way. Alright. Trigger's hooked up. Now, what should happen is you go and pull it out of the case, and all of that just fell out. That's what should happen. So that's the tip. When you're hooking those up, the tight loop goes on the carburetor. Just like that. So then you can pivot it over and slide it into that trigger. No problems. That's how it's supposed to be done. Alright, engine out. Get off of there. Case needs hosed out because, gee, we got a fuel leak. So, again, I don't know anything about this. I know that fuel had evaporated in this tank enough to make a gelled up mess. I know the fuel line is hard and it leaks fuel. See that? I know that duckbill has fuel in it, and there's something in the duckbill valve. See how the tip is slightly open? That's not right. So if it's sat there for too long, this duckbill is going to be trash. Yep, it is trash. Never going to stop leaking. I'll replace that right now because, again, I am not a fan of having fuel spilling all over my damn bench if I can avoid it. Okay, that should be that. We might as well take the fuel hose off and get the tank out of the way. And when you've got one with fuel in it, you want to loosen the cap so that it doesn't immediately pressurize and make the mess that, in this case, I'm trying to avoid. Alright. So we already looked at spark. For in and out on these, that is fairly close to normal. Every once in a while, when I tear one apart, I'll set it a tiny bit tighter than that, but you don't want to bind it. These have thrust washers on either side of the crankshaft. You've got to have some side to side so that the piston can center up properly. That's just the way it works. Yeah, these didn't have the world's greatest compression, but it'll be adequate. We'll get it running. Alright, looking at these hoses, they're original. This one actually is moving on the barb there. I want to show you guys that. Right here. See that twisting? How good of a seal can it possibly have if it'll do that? Now that, as you recall, is the one that has the duckbill valve on it. Now there's a new duckbill in here and the centered tube is still in place, but hey, you know, what good is it if you're leaking right over here? That's an air leak. And if it isn't a big one, it's a big enough one to alter the tuning here. And if it's intermittent, oh boy, ain't that fun. if you watched the Tin Man's latest series on his 026 he's been fighting, yeah, you want to talk about intermittency. So, we're just going to take this off. Now, I am not at all concerned about remembering where those hoses go. I've done this enough times, I'm not going to make the mistake anymore, but it's an easy one to make. So what you need to remember is this straight port is the one that gets the duckbill hose. That is a pressure line. The discharge line goes in here, and then the output that very seldom needs to be changed is that hose there that goes over to the bar pad. So it's pretty simple. Upper hose goes to the straight port, straight off of the oil pump diaphragm. That's where the engine pulse is coming in to actually pressurize the tank. Pretty simple. So it looks like that wasn't very tight. That wasn't very tight at all. There's not supposed to be a gasket there. And this gasket is actually for a later model Super 2 carburetor base gasket. So that matches that intake manifold that's in there that's not for this saw. Okay, now that must have gotten a new gasket. That's why it's separated from the reed valve here. Typically it ends up gluing itself to it, and I don't take it off. Okay, don't break that gasket. There's nothing to service in here. You can take a look at your reed valve, and when it's sitting flat like that, if it's less than a paper's width or no more than, you're fine. I know from experience you're fine. So we'll set that aside. Got a good gasket on there. Walbro HDA 60. This may be an upgrade carburetor. I'm not sure the HDA came from the factory on one of these. I honestly don't know that. I don't believe it appears in any of the IPLs, but I know it appears in some of the service bulletins. Alright, so we're down this far. What's left? Well, not a lot. You've got crank seals, and I guess we could pressure test this. We could. I wouldn't normally, so I'm not going to now. Will I regret that? I hope not. Yeah, very seldom do I actually replace crank seals on these things. Alright. We've got our washers doubled up on the outside. One of those should have been on the inside. 3-shoe clutch. I'm going to leave that in place. What I'm digging for here is this oil pump diaphragm. Given the state of deterioration on the fuel line, I want to make sure that we don't have a brittle or torn automatic oil pump, because those cause huge runnability issues. It becomes a giant air leak. Because again, you've got your engine pulse in there, and there's an atmospheric vent hole. Well, when that leaks, you have an air leak that can be a miserable bastard to track down if you're not familiar with the fact that it can happen. Alright, I'm going to try and do this without tearing anything. Even though the aftermarket has stepped up and is now producing these gaskets and diaphragms, still not something you want to just jack up if you don't need to. I'm trying to separate the gasket from the cover here. And this is just me being lazy and not wanting to pull the clutch. If you can separate it from the cover without tearing something and making a mess, you can leave the clutch in place. Which again, if we end up with a leaky crank seal, I'm going to have to come back and pull that loose anyhow. But I'm taking that gamble. Okay. There we go. Got some gobbledygook in here. Actually, I don't know what the hell that liquid is. It almost feels and acts like water. I don't know what it is. After all this time, I don't know how it could be water. I really don't. Alright, there's our diaphragm. Now that is dirty, but it's not torn. And if you're really concerned, you can hold it up to the light and check around the edges of the gasket. That's not torn. There's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong at all. Now I do want to clean all the crap off. Again, it's an atmospheric vent that, where is it? Right there. So this faces back towards the muffler, but you can see that vent hole right there. That's where the crap gets in on these things. Just clean that up. And I'm not looking for sterile. Get the crap out. Okay. So there's no reason to leave this apart. I see zero problems here. None at all. So we're just going to put it back together. Which, because we did it this way, is going to be pretty simple. Just line up your plunger. Drop it in. Make sure the two holes on the exterior, or on the perimeter to the back, the center hole to the front. Well, I just reversed that. Two mounting holes towards the front of the engine, single to the back. Your spring hits the diaphragm and then the cover. Super simple. And then these go back in. And once you get one snugged in, it's real useful because then the spring stops trying to explode it back out at you. This wasn't a waste of time though. Now if there's something goofy going on with tuning, I can eliminate this. And that's a much quicker thing to do a visual check on that diaphragm than it is to put block-off plates on and pump it up to do a leak down test. At this point I pretty much know if I have an air leak, it's either going to be a crank seal or it's going to be the engine halves themselves, because these are put together with just silicone. And looking at this, because we have buildup down here, I don't think that it's too likely that the crankcase is leaking. Because generally if it's leaking fuel, you don't get the sticky buildup that actually stays put. It'll actually clean that off and then be really wet with fuel mix down in here. Because again, that is just silicone that goes right against this half of the crankcase. So just looking, I don't see a lot of evidence. She's a little dirty, but it looks like the kind of dirty that comes when you have a duckbill bad and you're tilting the saw and it leaks a little fuel, sprays it around. Again, am I guessing a little bit here? Yes, but they're fairly educated guesses. While we got this apart, let's put this back together. That is a new clutch drum. And this is a lock nut. Okay. The way that was assembled before is not correct. There is supposed to be a thrust washer between the clutch and the drum. So that is correct. And that amount of wobble is also correct. And this in and out is correct. It allows it to center up on the bar. That's just the way they built them. So, alright. All of this leads me to believe we're going to find issues within carburetor. And I think I already see an issue before I even take it apart. Okay, that looks like diaphragm material on top. How many times have we talked about diaphragm against the block on this fuel inlet side? I'll bet we're going to find that reversed. What do you know? It's reversed. Wow, and that's clean in there. Now the question is, can I get that off of there without destroying it and reuse it? I don't keep a huge number of... Oh, that tells you that didn't run long like that. I don't keep a huge array of HDA parts on hand because I don't do that many of them. This has been assembled for long enough that, yeah, this is questionable. I may get this off and go, seriously, I can't do that. Or maybe I'll get lucky. I don't know. That's not great. That's not great at all. Now, we're going to go on a quick little tangent and see if that is by some miracle the same as an SDC gasket. And you know what? Almost, but not quite. Almost, but not quite. Whatever that passage is right there. Looks like an app. Is that the vent? That is. It's atmospheric vent for something. Nice try. I'm going to go digging for some HDA parts. Come back. Okay, got lucky. Dug through my miscellaneous bin, and what did I find? So, that's good news. Bad news is we need to clean this crap off. And make sure it's all out of the carburetor before we reassemble it. You want to be careful with using a razor blade the way I am, that you're not taking metal up. Yes, you can see some minor little scratches in places, but okay. If you're not certain that all the garbage is out, you can use an air hose. I'm pretty happy. I think we're good. Okay. That looks right. So, let's try a novel idea and put it on the way it's supposed to be this time. It looks pretty good. Got it lined up enough that she'll drop in. Love it. Don't love it. Something's not right there. What did I do? I'm looking through here and the gasket's not lining up. What the hell did I do? Do I have it? What the hell? What the frick is going on here? Go ahead. You dumb scum. You know, you have those days. That looks a little better. Let's try that. Yeah, that looks a little better. Genius. Nothing like reversing them. Alright, that's good and tight. That's going to go in the scrap heap where it belongs. I want to take an initial reading on that carb. With pressure testing it and just see what we're working with. Whatever runnability issues this thing had, I'm 90% certain we just solved the vast majority. Okay, that's holding pressure pretty good. Not bad. Not bad at all. But we're already this far in. We are going to look at this. Because I was looking the other day, and I don't think I have an HDA video on YouTube yet. So at least this will be a reference point. They are so similar to an HDC, it's not even funny. Again, some of those gaskets almost look like they'll fit. Almost is good for hand grenades, horseshoes, a few other things. Carburetor gaskets, not as much. Okay. Shit, this is out of sequence too. I'm glad we opened it up. Alright. Needle moves freely. I'm going to say that was replaced. And it looks like someone might have been into that Welch plug. One difference I can tell you is there's only 2 idle fuel passages and not 3 like an HDC. They look clear. I don't see a dark spot in the center. I can see aluminum all the way around, so I'm going to think that that's okay. But I don't like the way somebody seated that plug. That does not look tight enough for my liking. There we go. That, I know, is pushed out good and tight. So that I can live with. Alright. So, again, depends on which side of the carb you're working on as to which goes first, the gasket or the diaphragm. On the metering lever side, you want the diaphragm above the gasket. So here we've got another situation where the gasket has glued itself to the cover, but this one hasn't been exposed to nearly as much fuel, so it came loose. We got lucky on that one. I'm surprised that this thing pressure tested where it did. What are we doing? There we go. Very surprised. Okay. Go the right direction here. That diaphragm is sitting well below the cover there, so I think we're going to run with that. Get one screw started here and then we'll pump it up. Now that we've been in there, we'll check it again. Yeah. I have zero concerns about that arm being set too high. If anything, I'd say perhaps a smidge low. But I always assemble these covers under pressure, because when you have an arm that's set just marginally too high, initially it looks like it won't leak, but when you get down to the 3rd or 4th screw tightening it down, all of a sudden, poof, she releases. If you don't catch that here, well, you get to tear the saw back apart again after she's flooded out on your floor from sitting for a couple of days. Okay, I think the engine pulse ought to actuate that just fine. So we'll run with it. This saw is not going to turn out to be as complicated as it could have. Yeah, and that's part of why I've made so many of these videos. And again, I haven't done one explicitly on the HDA carb, but you know, these things, a lot of the rules are the same. And the order of those damn diaphragm to gasket, that is the same when you go from carb to carb. I mean, the best thing is you replace it exactly the way the factory put it. Someone's already been in there screwing around before you and you just don't know, well, that's something different. But That's also why a lot of us have put out as many manuals as we can so that you can find a drawing and compare it and get those things in the right order. Okay. That should be good enough. Alright. I'll bet she tried to run before, but I'll bet it ran like shit. And it probably flooded out because the diaphragms on this fuel pump side weren't able to close off. So, but it could have starved too, who knows? Hard to say. While we're in here, we're going to do hoses. We already know that the fuel hose is bad. We're going to go ahead and do the oil hoses too. That duckbill's not screwed up, so we'll reuse it. Take the centered tube out. Look at that, it basically fell out. And then we will attempt to hook the oil pickup hose here. Yeah, hoses shouldn't stretch like that. Alright. Sad little fact. I've worked on enough of this breed of saw and sold enough of the hose kits that I have that I know these dimensions by heart. The fuel hose is 7 1/4. The oil pickup line is 6 1/2. And the impulse line is 3 1/2. And that's generous. It's actually longer than it needs to be, but I like to give you guys a little something to work with in case your first attempt at fishing it doesn't go well and you got to trim it again. So, let's see if anybody's augured these holes out. No. Good. Now, the right way to do this would be to pierce it and use a wire to pull it through and all of that. I also know if you use a little bit of lube, which was just left on the side of the tank there, you can push it through, get a hold of it, and you're in. While that hose is still warm from being stretched like that, make it easier to get this little filter on. Notice I said easier, not easy. Tygon is very temperature sensitive. It's a lot easier to install for me in the summer than in the fall or winter. Today is a beautiful morning. It was 60 degrees when I rolled out to the shop. I made a lazy morning of it and watched a couple old Chris Farley movies. Something I haven't done in a long time. Tommy Boy and Almost Heroes. If you need some really stupid humor, those will do it. Did it for me. Alright, our impulse. A little lube on that. That's a little easier. It's at the top of the tank. Again, I just get the point started and use my thumbnail to push it and get it a little further in. And once you see it there, you grab it and rip the end off like that. No, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to get enough in that you can grab a good chunk of hose and do it right. But I guess if right doesn't work, then you can do it the way I just did it. When this stuff's new, it recovers pretty well from a stretch. Remember, when you're setting these damn things, you want to leave a gap between the duckbill and the hose, so the pressure will bleed out of the tank and not sit there and puke oil all over your floor. Something about like that. Pretty damn close. Now when you pull it back in, what you want to do is get it in there without ripping the duckbill off, number one. And then get it to sit See how it dropped down in there? And it's back there. The duckbill is not sitting on the wall of the tank. It's just kind of there. That's what you want. If the tip of the duckbill is hitting the side of the tank or something, it's not going to work right. It's not going to do what it's supposed to be doing. So, alright, so remember, the bottom, the oil pickup hose, goes over here. And it looks like I could shove a little more of that into the tank, but I'll get this hooked up first before doing that. Sorry for the arm in the way. There we go. Yep, that's a little bit of a curl there, so that one will pull in a little bit more. Maybe a smidge more. There we go. There we go. And that'll allow a little movement. And then the impulse hose, I don't care if it S's back a little bit here. That I'm okay with. Now this is actually bent a little. It's a little bit of an irritant. No, that's a big irritant. Who am I kidding? We're going to bend that back out. That wasn't much. But it might be just... okay. There we go. I don't see it too often, but every once in a while I see the port, this actual barb, pull out. You don't really want that either. Okay. There you go. Guaranteed not to be leaking. So, let's go ahead and fix up our fuel tank. Now this is where my putting fuel in it earlier comes back to haunt me. I don't want to flip fuel in my face. So I don't want to pull any more out of there than I have to doing the hose stretch routine. And this is stiff enough, especially like this, you want to be careful you don't fling this thing out and splash yourself with fuel. Alright. Most of that discoloration on the fuel filter is just from fuel mix and old evaporated. But because we're here, we're going to put a fresh filter on it. So that'll go in that receptacle there. So just like everything else, this time we'll lube it with fuel. It should pull right in. Alright. I find it easier to pull too much in to begin with and then adjust it back out as needed when you're hooking stuff up. Just the way I like to do it. Okay. Get that in there and sitting at the bottom of the tank, I hope. That hose circled on me. I don't like that. You don't want your fuel hose doing the pigtail in the tank there. And I mean the curly-Q pigtail, not schoolgirl pigtails. Alright. Oil cap on. So, with these, you've got your fuel barb right over here. What you want to do is get enough out of the tank that you can hook this up and create a gentle sweeping curve that doesn't kink the damn hose and doesn't rub on the air filter housing. So let me get this hooked up on the barb fully, and then we'll see what that looks like. Okay, that's good. Alright. So that's actually pretty good. By dumb luck, we got it. But that's what you want. You want a little clearance between the air filter cup and the hose, which we have there. And you don't want a kink right there. You want a smooth transition. That'll flow fuel. And there's still some extra in the tank that'll allow the filter to drag around as you tilt the saw from side to side. Alright, I need to dig through this box. See if I can find a couple missing parts. Wow. Bunch of carburetor parts there. I don't know if those are HDA or HDC. What I'm looking for is the, okay, here's the air filter. A new one, and one that just needs to be cleaned a little. Okay. But what I'm not seeing is that air filter support. That's too bad. God, this box is a mess. Alright. And something in there has very sticky old fuel on it, and I don't like it. Do we have... oh boy. Do we have an air filter support? Hey, we do have one right here. My last one on hand. At least out here. Might have one in the house in the listed parts, but... there we go. So the IPLs are not real helpful on this. Sometimes they don't show the order and they call that a retainer. It is a support. You put the damn filter on top of it. Just like that. You don't put the filter in and then jam that retainer on top of it and squish it. That'll just push it down into the choke. Don't do that. That is the correct way to do it. Alright. What do you say we slip this bad boy back into the engine housing? So, I'll demonstrate with the muffler on, because normally I don't take these off. It's got the spark arrestor in it, it's got the proper spacers, and it's covered in fuel, so we'll just wipe a little bit of that off. This is not a saw I'll be holding on to, I'll be selling it, so I want to at least set the new owner up for a good experience with it. And that means having a proper muffler that I can't seem to keep together long enough to put it on the saw. Come on. Thank you. Get going there. Alright. Before anything can happen, let's screw this stupid thing in place. There we go. That's out of the way. Alright. So all the bouncing around knocked that air filter loose, not uncommon. You can put it in after the engine's in the housing. I just try to get it there first. Alright, tuck your spark plug wire up into this recess right here, and when it's done you want the wire underneath this final cylinder fin, okay? You don't want it jammed up here or it won't go in the housing right. Okay, I'm going to bring you in a little closer again. Where's my throttle rod? Hey look, there it is. Small loop. Bingo. Now you got to get it in a little bit further. And I will try to tilt this up and show you guys what it is I'm doing. I think you can see it, but I'm not sure. Okay. That's starting to go in pretty hard. Yep, I had a jam. There we go. Alright. So play with the throttle trigger until you get it down. Alright, you can't see that. This is going to be difficult. Alright, see the piece that's moving in there? That's the throttle trigger. You've got your your area right there. That's where that rod has to hook up. Let me see if I can get a hold of this with pliers. Okay. And slide the engine in as you're aligning the rod into that hole. And if you have it the right side up, look at that. You see how that went together? You don't have to screw with this. Especially on the older metal housings where you just have a lock tab, plastic tab back here. More times you take that off, more likely you are to break it. Not a good thing. Alright, so that part is in. You can see the spark plug wire here. You can now pop it out of your way. And you can see that now the chain adjuster screw has kind of jammed against the case. You got to pull it, get it realigned. And these plastic housings are kind of a pain in the ass. There's something in here that catches, and you fight with it, and then all of a sudden she drops into place. And the screw holes should be reasonably close at this point, which these are. So we're going to go ahead and get that engine secured. We're going to use a little Loctite blue on these, because they do like to rattle out, and that's not cool. Also not cool when they don't start when they should. Come on. Screw damaged. Is my alignment bad? Yeah, there we go. There she goes. So again, I find it far easier to get all four started before you tighten any one down. Just get a couple threads in to where you know that it's going to go and it's not cross-threaded. All right. Okay. We are almost there. Don't forget to reroute your kill switch wire. And it should go underneath the spark plug wire. And you will need a set of needle nose pliers to do this. And it's awkward. But you're going to line it up on that kill switch tab of the coil. And then all of a sudden, bloop, there she goes. Very important detail. Kill switch is good. Using a choke to kill an engine just makes for a hard restart. Alright, air filter cover looks a little distorted, but whatever, we're going to run it. It's not really that critical, and it should kind of hopefully go back into shape a little bit. If you get that in place before you put your starter on, that's a good thing. Starter rope is actually in pretty good shape despite the messy tie job up here. Look at that. So obviously I have some details to finish up. Things like the front handle and the guard and dealing with the bar and chain and all that stuff. But I don't need to do any of that. Just fire it up and see if we found our problem. Alright. Choke lever is rubbing against the distortion in this air filter cover, or air box cover. That actually may be sitting too deep in there. Let's see about that. Yeah, it's a little bit goofy. I may fight with that a little bit and widen that notch. I may not. I wonder if somebody bent that lever a little. As long as it's closing and it allows it to start. Let's give it a shot. Huh. Should we put a spark plug in it? We probably should. That would probably help. Try that again. Now that is too many pulls. So is that choke staying closed? I'm going to pop this cover back off. Maybe. It was not. So I do have to fix that. Okay. What are we doing? Okay, my initial setting on the low was a little on the lean side, and it had no idle because the screw was backed out all the way. I'm not going to get in the middle of the bar oil wars anymore. I don't want to get in the middle of the fuel mix wars anymore. Just don't want to have any part of it. I will tell you I use this because it's available to me locally at Bi-Mart, and it's red. It makes it super easy to see, especially with my Tygon hoses. So I want to get this chain oil system primed. It's the last major hurdle here. If she blows oil, we're good to go. I trim this cover so that it's not hitting the choke lever, and then I do all the little maintenance stuff, and this is all ready to sell. So when she starts to prime, I'll be able to see the oil come up that lower hose towards the oil pump there. That hose is going to change color, and I like that. like that. There she is. So, whew, and now she's smoky. I say there was some good residue at the bottom of the fuel tank that's now dissolving and being burnt out. So it'll be smoky for a little while. Yeah, you can see the haze up there. Alright, what did we learn? I don't know, maybe nothing. That's just how I approach a saw. I know I've done a few of these videos now. This seemed like a perfect opportunity because literally anything that the previous owner told me, I have forgotten months ago. So going into this, I had no idea what we would find. I find this to be fairly typical. If there's a saw that someone has worked on that maybe isn't super familiar with saws, finding stuff wrong in the carburetor is a real common thing. And that sucks if you're new to this and you don't know some of the basics of where, you know, gasket versus diaphragm, what order and all of that. All I can say is go to the manuals. And if you can't find one, drop a note on the forum or something. They're out there. I'm sure there's plenty of obscure saws, like obscure 50s, 40s, that kind of stuff that you're not going to find it. But this kind of stuff, most of it's on my website. What isn't, somebody else has somewhere. And you can get those blow-up diagrams. Google your carburetor. If it's an HDA, what I say, 60, you just type that into Google, you're going to get a blown-up diagram of it with a listing of most, if not all, the part numbers from Walbro. Now, those aren't the Homelite numbers. And Homelite didn't sell individual pieces to those carbs, but they sold rebuild kits. Virtually certain that's what this is. And I just noticed my air filter retainer or support is down in there too, so I can refill that bin on my bench. So anyway, again, start with the basics. Don't assume goofy stuff like, oh, it's a bad crank seal and that's why it won't start. Okay, I hear that a lot, and maybe on a newer saw that might be the case. You'd have to have one like missing before one of these just wouldn't start. And even then, if you get a little bit of fuel in there, it ought to start race die as it leans out. You know, even if that silicone at the two crankcase halves was blown out, it's still going to start. It's just not going to tune right. You're going to have to tune it way rich, and it's going to be intermittent when you tilt your saw. You know, as fuel slops in the bottom of that crankcase, because it will puddle down there. If you tune it richer than what it's supposed to be to cure an air leak, at some point, at some engine speed, you're going to be puddling fuel. And when you tilt the saw, it's going to die out. Conversely, it'll lean out. You know what I mean? So, anyhow, just one way to approach it. I now have an XL to finish up. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.